The story begins as we see a man going on a rampage, and people are running away. He starts to eat a motorbike, and the people are scared. But the number one hero, All Might, suddenly appears, and he takes the man out with a single punch. Everyone cheers for him as he takes the man away, and we meet a boy named Koichi who can't believe how amazing he was. We learn that in this world, 80% of people are born with abilities known as quirks, but it caused chaos across the world, so the job of hero was created to restore order. We learn that heroes are sanctioned by the government, but there are also those known as vigilantes, who operate outside the law. Koichi realizes that he's late for his class, so he quickly runs off, but he ends up running into some thugs. Their leader tells him he made him spill his drink, so he instantly bows down and apologizes, and they all think he's pathetic. The leader goes to kick him, but he suddenly slides away. We learn that he's a university student, and he has the slide and glide quirk, which allows him to slide on surfaces that he has 3 points of contact with. But he can only go as fast as a bike, and people think he's weird when he's on the floor. Later that day, we see a girl called Popstep, who sings in front of her fans, and they all enjoy her performance. But Koichi thinks there's nothing special about her songs. He thinks her smile makes her stand out while she's jumping around, and he thinks it must be nice to have a jumping quirk. But he realizes he's late for work, so he slides away, as he notes that life is unfair. The people are shocked as he moves past them, but he hits a puddle, which causes him to crash. He starts working in a convenience store, and he sees the thugs he met earlier. They call him a cockroach and beat him up, and after that, we see that Koichi is angry, because he thinks the police failed to do their jobs, thinking the thugs deserve to be arrested. So he decides to become a vigilante to blow off some steam. He slides around the town as he looks for his target, but he sees a woman drop her phone, so he picks it up for her. He helps everyone do their everyday tasks, and even throws away their trash, so they start calling him the nice guy, and he thinks it feels amazing to help people. He heads to an alley, where he's given a drink, and he realizes it's Pop. She knows that he's been picking up trash for everyone, but she can't remember his name, and calls him the cockroach guy. She thinks his hoodie looks lame, wondering if he's trying to cosplay All Might, so he explains that he's just trying to do good for everyone. She thinks he knows his place in life, so she starts teasing him, but he tells her not to get carried away with her idol act. So she becomes angry and prepares to slap him, but ends up hitting the thugs instead. So they decide to teach her a lesson and start mocking her outfit because it makes her look like a pervert. They think her face paint looks terrible, and she explains that she wears it to hide her face from the public, but they decide to post her real face online. Koichi tells them to stop, but they tell him to get lost, and he's afraid of them, so he prepares to walk away. But she cries out for help, so he realizes he needs to save her. He knows he isn't a good fighter, so he uses his quirk to launch a surprise attack, but it doesn't work, and he just gets thrown away. Their leader remembers him, and realizes he's trying to act like a hero. So he kicks him, telling him he'll destroy him along with the convenience store. Koichi wonders why they would do that, so the man explains that it's because he made him angry. Pop threatens to call the police, but they tell her to call All Might instead, and the leader prepares to stab Koichi, but a man suddenly comes crashing down, and he notes that All Might won't be coming, but he's there to save the day. The leader thinks he's just an old man, but he punches him away, and everyone wonders who he is. So he introduces himself as Knuckle Duster, and he specializes in fighting crime. He knocks out one of the thugs, and checks his tongue, but realizes he isn't his target. He takes out the other thug, and notes that his tongue also looks normal, and Koichi tries to leave, but Knuckle Duster tells him he can make him a hero. Koichi notes that he isn't interested, but Knuckle Duster knows he's lying, because he wants to be like All Might. He thinks he doesn't have what it takes to be a pro hero, because his quirk is lame. But Knuckle Duster tells him it doesn't matter, because powerful quirks and getting a hero license have nothing to do with true justice, telling him the only thing that matters is that they take action. So Koichi realizes he doesn't have a license, and the leader takes Pop hostage. Koichi thinks about what Knuckle Duster told him, and he takes the leader down, so Knuckle Duster praises him, and he knocks the leader out. He realizes that the leader isn't his target, but he decides to check his ID just in case, and he offers to teach Koichi how to become a hero, but he turns him down, because he thinks Knuckle Duster is insane. They head to Koichi's house, and Knuckle Duster checks his ID, but Koichi tells him to stop looking through his things. He wants Koichi to be his apprentice, but Koichi refuses, telling him to leave his house. But Knuckle Duster sees beer in his fridge, and decides to take it for himself, as Koichi realizes that he isn't listening to him. We see the thugs walking away, as the leader notes that he wants to get revenge, and there's a man that appears in front of them, telling them he can help. So they take a drug from him, and their bodies suddenly transform, but it makes them go insane. We return to Knuckle Duster, as he reveals that he's looking for a dangerous drug called Trigger, which boosts the user's quirks, but weakens their sense of reason. It turns people into villains, and he thinks they should get rid of it, because it will cause chaos in the city. Koichi thinks they should let the heroes and police handle it, but Knuckle Duster explains that it will cause villains to appear out of nowhere, and the authorities won't be able to respond on time. He thinks they should stop suspicious individuals, and check their tongues, revealing that Trigger causes the user's tongue to turn black. He suggests beating up the people with black tongues, so that they can find the dealer, and stop the circulation of the drug. Koichi thinks he's joking, but realizes he's serious as he starts chasing people he finds suspicious. Pop asks them what's happening, so Koichi fills her in, and she asks him why he's helping Knuckle Duster. So he explains that he's there to stop him, because Knuckle Duster will beat everyone up if he's alone. He notes that he'll only punch the ones that look suspicious, but she tells him to use his head, and suggests searching for criminals online, before asking people about them. Koichi thinks her plan is brilliant, but Knuckle Duster approaches another man, so Koichi tries to stop him, but he tells the man to show his tongue. He drops his briefcase, and we see that it's filled with toys, but Knuckle Duster still finds him suspicious, so he decides to knock him out. But a cloth suddenly stops him, and a man named Eraserhead arrives, asking him if he's one of the instant villains that have been appearing lately. He recognizes Eraserhead as a hero, so Koichi and Pop freak out, thinking they're being treated as villains. Knuckle Duster charges in, but Eraserhead stops him and kicks him away. He endures the blow, and immediately recovers, so he thinks Knuckle Duster has a quirk that enhances his durability. So he uses his quirk to erase it, and lands another kick. But Knuckle Duster grabs onto him, so he realizes Knuckle Duster's strength isn't coming from a quirk. They continue fighting, and the man runs away, but Pop suddenly recognizes him, because he's always in the pictures where instant villains appear. She thinks he knows something, so she chases after him, and Koichi asks him to show his tongue, but the thugs suddenly appear, telling him they have unfinished business. Eraserhead stops fighting, so Knuckle Duster asks him if he's tired, but he apologizes for the misunderstanding, realizing Knuckle Duster isn't a villain, since he has no quirk, so he has no reason to capture him. He notes that he can't charge him with anything, but still finds him suspicious, so he decides to report him to the police, but he suddenly hears a commotion. We see the thugs chasing after Koichi, and their leader turns himself into a ball of spikes, which Koichi barely dodges, but he realizes he's surrounded. But Knuckle Duster comes to his rescue. He asks Koichi about Pop, and he reveals that she's chasing after the suspicious man, so they start looking for her. The leader gets back up, but Eraserhead restrains him, recognizing him as a villain. Pop tells the man to stop, but one of the thugs attacks her, and she crashes into the man. He drops his toys, but he takes one of them, and uses it to inject Trigger into his body, causing him to transform into a giant creature. Everyone panics as they see him, but he grabs Pop and the thug, and starts playing with them. Knuckle Duster kicks him in the face, causing him to lose balance, and he lets go of Pop, so she starts falling to the ground. But Koichi realizes she's in trouble, because he knows her quirk allows her to leap, only if her foot touches something. So he rushes to get to her, and we learn that he decided to help Knuckle Duster, because he always wanted to be a hero. He knows he doesn't have what it takes to be a pro, because his quirk is pathetic, but he still wants to be able to help people. He grabs onto her, and tells her to leap, but he panics as he starts to fall. The giant tries to grab him, but Koichi makes contact with his hand, and uses it to activate his quirk, allowing him to jump away to a pile of garbage. The giant is about to crush him, but Eraserhead activates his quirk, which causes the man to lose his powers, and he captures him. The police arrive, so Knuckle Duster walks away, and Eraserhead thanks him for his help. He notes that he's just a citizen with good intentions, but Eraserhead notes that vigilantes like him are also dangerous. He explains that he can do things that pro heroes can't do, saying they can defeat villains before they cause any damage, but Eraserhead tells him it's a crime to attack people who haven't done anything. He tells Eraserhead he can't arrest him, because he still hasn't committed a crime, and he tells Knuckle Duster he has a bad attitude, but he doesn't seem to care. We see Koichi with Pop, who asks him if he's okay, so he tells her he's tired, because he tried to act like a hero, even though he's not cut out for it. She finds him annoying, because she doesn't know if he's trying to make up excuses or be humble, and she tells him she wanted to thank him. Knuckle Duster praises him for copying his style and falling into a pile of garbage, but he tells Koichi he still has much to learn. He notes that he doesn't want to be Knuckle Duster's apprentice, but he knows that Koichi is lying, because he called him his master. He explains that it was just a slip of the tongue, but Knuckle Duster knows that it reveals his true feelings, so he tells him to face the truth. We see Pop as she watches two middle schoolers fighting, and she reports that they're using their quirks, so Koichi tells her he's on his way. We learn that Knuckle Duster gave him protective gear so that he could increase his speed without worrying about getting injured. He reaches the middle schoolers and tells them to stop fighting, but he loses his balance and crashes into another pile of garbage. They ask him what he's doing there, and he recalls that Knuckle Duster told him to change his name because Nice Guy doesn't sound intimidating. He tells him he's the Crawler, but they know that everyone calls him the Nice Guy. So he explains that he has changed and teaches them how to pronounce his name. But they find him annoying, so one of them uses his laser vision to knock him down, and they start beating him up. But Knuckle Duster suddenly arrives, and he threatens to beat them up, so Koichi stops him, telling him he doesn't need to fight them. He notes that he feels amazing when he punches people, but Koichi tells him it isn't the right thing to do, and the middle schoolers think they're ridiculous. Pop approaches them, and they instantly recognize her, so she gives them her autograph. She tells her friends they don't need to fight the middle schoolers because they are bad people, but they suddenly hear a commotion as an invincible villain appears. He smashes the wall and sends a baby flying, so Koichi uses his quirk to save him, while Knuckle Duster punches the villain. But it has no effect, and the villain sends him flying. He mentions that no one can hurt him, and he sticks out his tongue, so everyone realizes he's on trigger. Knuckle Duster and Koichi charge in, but the villain tells them they don't stand a chance. He kicks Koichi away, and Knuckle Duster appears behind the villain, knowing he still hasn't mastered his quirk, since he only just acquired it. Koichi helps Knuckle Duster take him down, and he brutally beats him up, until he eventually returns to his original form. Knuckle Duster tells Koichi to take a picture of him, but his face is a bloody mess, so they can't tell what he looks like. The mother of the baby thanks them for saving him, and they restrain the villain, while Pop tells the middle schoolers that Trigger makes the user's tongue turn black. She tells them to contact her if anything happens, but everyone hears the police approaching, so she jumps away, telling the middle schoolers to watch her next performance. They ask Koichi about his group, so he tells them they're new heroes, and they leave before the police arrive. A detective investigates the incident, and a cop tells him about the villain's powers, thinking they can identify him if they check the quirk registry. But the detective knows they won't find him there, because he took Trigger to enhance his quirk, and became an instant villain. The detective wonders which hero arrested him, since he's so badly beat up, thinking whoever did it could be suspended for excessive violence. But the officer reveals that no heroes were dispatched to the area, so the detective realizes it was the work of a vigilante. The officer thinks it doesn't matter, since they defeated the villain, but the detective considers them as a criminal, because they're working outside the law. We see Pop at Koichi's house, and she tells him everyone's talking about the incident. So he asks her what they think about the new heroes, but she reveals that they call him the Squaller, and he can't believe they didn't get his name right. We see Koichi attending a lecture about pro heroes, and he thinks about how he always wanted to be one of them. So he decided to help people as a vigilante, but he isn't making money by doing it, so he needs to keep his job to make ends meet. As he makes his way home, he goes into an alley and uses his quirk to reach the top. He returns home, but he's surprised to see a stranger who has made himself comfortable. Koichi asks him if he's a thief, but he reveals that he's Knuckle Duster, and Koichi wonders how he got in, because the door was locked. So he reveals that he used the window, and Koichi realizes he broke in. The doorbell suddenly rings, and he sees a girl outside, but he doesn't recognize her, so he asks her who she is. She dashes past him and puts on her makeup, so he realizes she's Pop. He patches up the window, and Knuckle Duster reveals that his afternoon job ended early, so he decided to take a break until nighttime. Koichi can't believe he has a job, and Pop mentions that she needs to prepare for her live performance, telling him not to peek while she changes her clothes. But she asks Knuckle Duster why his coat is on her side, telling him everything behind the curtain is her territory, but Koichi reminds them they're in his house. He tells them he needs to go to work, and they bid him farewell, but he's sad because they've already invaded his house. We see Koichi in the convenience store, where he thinks about his life, thinking it's nothing like the student life he always dreamed of. He notes that he has no friends at the university, and his boss suddenly yells at him to focus. Pop performs in front of her fans, and we see that the middle schoolers are there to support her. She tells them to get in line if they want to shake her hand, and a fan named Taro tries to get closer, but another fan punches him away. The middle schooler named Namimaru tells him not to cut in line, and the other one named Ichinoku notes that Pop is cute, so he can understand why everyone wants to shake her hand, but he explains they need to show restraint, because she might cry if they start to act selfish. But he mentions that he'll convert his burning emotions to create a love explosion, and he creates a pillar of light for her. She thanks him for supporting her, but Namamaru asks him why he's trying to stand out alone, and Taro tells them to shut up. We see that his tongue is black, and he injects trigger into his body, causing him to transform into a giant eel. He starts covering everyone with slime, and Pop panics as he approaches her. As Koichi finishes his shift, he sees Taro chasing Pop as she jumps around the town. He asks the middle schoolers what happened, but they just call him the Squalor, and they freak out as they see Knuckle Duster. He knows it won't be easy to stop Taro, so he comes up with a plan, telling Koichi they'll use a pincer movement. Taro continues to chase Pop, but Koichi suddenly grabs onto him, and Knuckle Duster prepares to finish him off. But the slime causes his fist to slide, and he falls off with Koichi. They wonder how they can stop Taro, but they see a restaurant and come up with a plan. Pop hides in an alley, and Taro starts searching for her, but she suddenly greets him and mentions that she's ready to shake his hand. We learn that Koichi told her to do it because he thinks it will calm Taro down, and she shakes his hand. But he suddenly wraps himself around her and prepares to kiss her. Koichi pours flour onto them, and Knuckle Duster notes that it will absorb the slime, so Taro can't use it to escape. Knuckle Duster beats him up, but they realize that the cops are approaching, so they decide to leave. Pop finishes taking a bath, and she tells Koichi to change his shampoo because his hair will get damaged. Knuckle Duster notes that he's running out of beer, and she tells him to stop walking around without his clothes on, but he reminds her that they aren't in her territory. She starts ranting about his behavior, telling him he has no manners, but he just calls her a baby. Koichi leaves to hang their clothes, and notes that he isn't living the student life he always dreamed of, but he thinks his life isn't so bad. At the police headquarters, the detectives investigate the instant villains that have been appearing. One of them, named Tsukachi, notes that the villains used trigger, and most of them appeared around the Narahata district. The other detective, Tanuma, wonders if they can trace the drug back to its source, but Tsukachi explains that the instant villains don't know the person who gave it to them. Tanuma can't believe they're handing it over for free because the drug is expensive, so he thinks the goal of the dealer is to disturb the public order. We return to Koichi as Pop tells him that the middle schoolers became friends with Taro. So Koichi realizes he was released, and Pop explains that he didn't mean to cause harm, revealing that he was just tricked into using trigger. She notes that he's willing to tell her how he got the drug, and Koichi thinks they'll finally get a lead, so he prepares to tell Knuckle Duster about it. But she stops him, telling him Knuckle Duster might beat Taro up, so Koichi decides not to get him involved. They make their way to Taro and his friends, but Pop struggles to keep up with Koichi, telling him her shoes are just made for leaping. So he tells her to grab onto his arm, but she's worried that people might get the wrong idea. He reminds her that she isn't even a real celebrity, but a girl named Keen appears, and she recognizes Pop, asking her if they can have a picture together. Koichi takes their picture, and Keen wonders if he's Pop's boyfriend, so he tells her it isn't the case, but she wonders why he's so quick to deny it. She explains that he's her servant, and Keen thanks them for the picture. Pop meets Ichinoku and asks him about Namamaru, so Ichinoku reveals that he's buying fan merch with Taro. He invites her to talk at the cafe, but they realize that Knuckle Duster is already there, and he tells them to join him. Keen looks at her picture with Pop, but her friends don't even recognize her, wondering how Keen knows about her. But there's suddenly a bee, and she tells her friends she needs to go to work, so they think she's a weirdo. She heads to an alley, and we learn that she's actually a villain who uses her quirk to control the bees, which can inject people with trigger. She uses them to attack the civilians, who turn into instant villains, causing everyone to panic, and Namamaru is separated from Taro. Koichi hears the commotion, so he wonders if there was an accident, but Knuckle Duster sees a bee and runs off. Pop reveals that multiple villains appeared in the streets, but the pro heroes suddenly arrive, and they easily control the situation. Meanwhile, Knuckle Duster catches a bee, and he approaches Namamaru, asking him if he knows the person controlling the bees. He crushes it, and Keen realizes one of her bees was killed. Taro asks her if she's okay, so she tells him she's fine, and she leads him away. We see a group of villains terrorizing the girls in the city, but Knuckle Duster suddenly appears and beats them up. Koichi realizes they aren't trigger users, because their tongues are black, and he recalls how Namamaru mentioned that Knuckle Duster is looking for a bee tamer. The next day, Knuckle Duster teaches Koichi how to fight, but he asks Knuckle Duster why he's been acting strange, wondering if it's because of the bee tamer. But he hits Koichi, who mentions that he'll never be a good fighter, so he thinks they should just stop training. But Knuckle Duster gives him the pads, and starts punching him with incredible force. He gets blown away, and Pop tells Knuckle Duster to hold back, because Koichi isn't as strong as him. But he notes that Knuckle Duster is always holding back, telling her he never kills his opponents, but Pop still thinks he's a savage. We see Keen walking around the city as her boss tells her she went overboard during the last incident because she injected the trigger into random civilians. He notes that the drug is valuable, but she doesn't care, telling him he's still got the data. He tells her the drug's effect depends on the user's mental state, so he orders her to look for someone with explosive energy in their heart. At night, Keen talks to a homeless man and thinks he's the perfect choice because he's completely insane. She tells him to destroy society and injects him with the drug, causing him to transform into a brute. There's suddenly an explosion, and Koichi panics as he sees the brute. He charges at Koichi, so he uses his quirk to get away and tells Pop to evacuate the civilians. She mentions that a villain has appeared, so everyone runs for their lives, but there's a man that gets cornered, so Koichi saves him, but the brute chases after him. Knuckle Duster suddenly kicks the brute away, but he immediately recovers and smashes the ground. Knuckle Duster notes that the power in the brute's body shifted to his fist the moment he attacked, and he's confident that he can defeat him with his fists. The brute charges in, and Knuckle Duster fights him head-on, but Koichi worries, because Knuckle Duster is getting hit. The brute concentrates his power into his fist, but Knuckle Duster dodges his attack, and he lands a devastating blow, which manages to knock him out. He explains that he was waiting for the brute to do that, so that he could attack him while his body was vulnerable. But he admits that he struggled against him, thinking he was a worthy opponent. The next day, Knuckle Duster continues to train with Koichi, but he accidentally hits him in the head. So Pop looks after him, but he's glad that his master is back to normal. We see Keen in a restaurant, where she tells her boss that Knuckle Duster is getting in the way. But her boss explains that vigilantes are useful, because they can use them to gather data without involving the authorities. A man suddenly approaches her, and we learn that she was waiting for him, telling him he looks even better in person. She tells him they should skip the introduction, and she leaves with him. We see a villain running around the city, as a truck chases after him. We meet the hero Ingenium as he puts on his armor, and he jumps out of the truck. He uses his boosters to accelerate, and chases after the villain, telling him to slow down. But he doesn't cooperate, so Ingenium prepares to take him down, but the villain dodges and kicks him away. He manages to escape, and Ingenium crashes into a wall, but he survives thanks to his airbags. We see Koichi practicing with his quirk, and he notes that he can't go too fast, because it will be harder for him to stop. He sees a man jogging, and accelerates to overtake him, but he wonders how he can stop his momentum. He's shocked as the man catches up to him, and he's about to crash, but the man saves him, telling him to be careful. The man apologizes for scaring him, and introduces himself as Ingenium. Koichi can't believe it, and he reveals that he's a big fan, but Ingenium knows that he still hasn't mastered his quirk. He asks Koichi how it works, so he reveals that he can use it to move in all directions, and even use it to spin. Ingenium tells him his quirk is useful, revealing that he isn't good at making sharp turns, and he notes that his younger brother can't even turn while he's using his quirk. But Koichi reveals that he loses control when he increases his speed, because he doesn't have brakes. He reveals that he always uses his feet to stop his movement, but he crashes when there's too much momentum. Ingenium reminds him that he can use his quirk to move backwards, so he should imagine himself accelerating in the opposite direction to stop the momentum. So he gives it a try, and he's amazed that it works, but he thinks his quirk is useless even if he can improve his speed. But Ingenium tells him it isn't true, because people caught in disasters need heroes to save them as fast as possible. He believes the most important thing for a hero is to save people with haste, so that they can take their hands and make them feel safe. He invites Koichi to join his agency after he graduates, but he notes that he doesn't have a hero license. So Ingenium tells him he can work as a support member and use his quirk to help people. Ingenium reveals that his team's policy is to put people with the right quirk in the perfect place, so that they can fight as a team by gathering their powers together. He gives Koichi his business card, telling him to call once he makes up his mind, and he dashes away. That evening, we see Ingenium chasing the running villain once again, and we learn that he ordered his subordinates to remove his airbags. The villain realizes he's ready to put his life on the line, but Ingenium catches up to him, and reveals that he's willing to entrust his life to his friends. He survives the crash, but the villain is worried that he might not make it, so he starts flying away, and Ingenium realizes that his quirk allows him to turn into a bat. He orders his team to catch the villain, but he easily outmaneuvers them, and Ingenium realizes he's about to get away. The villain thinks he's unstoppable, but Koichi suddenly sweeps his leg, and Knuckle Duster finishes him off. Ingenium sees the villain tied up, so he wonders who took him down. Knuckle Duster's group appears above them, revealing that they were able to predict the villain's movements because they know their way around the area. Koichi reveals his face, and he mentions that their group is called Knuckle Duster and the Crawler, but Pop notes that she has nothing to do with them. The next day, Anginium thanks Koichi for his help and asks him if he's the Crawler. But he plays dumb, so Anginium asks him to tell the Crawler he had a good run. But he asks for his business card back, and Koichi can't believe it, so he mentions how he thinks Koichi has already found the perfect place for him. We see Koichi with his classmates, and they think about finding a place to have tea, so he tells them his house is nearby. But when they realize it's on top of an abandoned building, they find him creepy and they decide to leave. The next day, Koichi goes to school and realizes that everyone's talking about him, thinking he's dangerous, so they decide to stay away from him. After class, Koichi thinks about how he messed up his college debut, but Pop starts arguing with Knuckle Duster again, and he thinks that the party never ends at his place. After a few months, Pop heads to Koichi's home, and she takes a pudding from his fridge. She starts eating it and asks him what he's up to, so he reveals that he's repairing his damaged hoodie. She suggests replacing it, but he notes that he wants to stick with it because it's an official All Might merch. He tells her he was saving the pudding she's eating, but she mentions that he doesn't have his name on it. He notes that it isn't a big deal and notes how she can never back down from a fight, so she becomes upset, but he just tells her he will buy food for her next time. She mentions that his hoodie looks terrible, but he tells her it isn't true, and she realizes he's angry at her. He shows her his collection, telling her he has all of the limited edition hoodies, except for the Silver Age edition from 5 years ago. He reveals that he gave it to someone, and explains that he was serious about becoming a hero when he was in middle school. In a flashback, we learn that Koichi signed up for the entrance exam to get into the hero course, but on the morning of the test, he saw a boy drowning in the river. So he jumped in to save him, but realized that the boy wasn't really in danger, because the water wasn't very deep. The bystanders help them dry up, and a woman brings him his hoodie, but he gives it to the boy, and rushes to take his test. We return to the present, as Koichi reveals that he was too late to take the exam, and he wonders what would have happened if he hadn't jumped in to save the boy. We learn that he saw a hero being interviewed, and he revealed that someone saved him when he was a boy, so Koichi thinks he was the boy he saved, and he's happy he turned into a hero, but Pop calls him an idiot, telling him he threw away his future. She suddenly leaves him, so he wonders what's wrong with her, and she goes home, as she thinks about what he said. We learn that she's the child he saved, and she can't believe he thought she was a boy. She recalls that she tried to leap across the river, but lost her footing because of a puddle, and fell into the water. She never forgot about Koichi, and she always wanted to thank him for everything he did for her, because she feels guilty for messing up his exam. She buys pudding for him, and visits him once again, telling him she wants to talk about something. But she realizes that Knuckle Duster is there, so she immediately changes her mind. She eats pudding with him, and Koichi wonders if she didn't buy anything for him, so she reveals that Knuckle Duster is eating his share. He realizes she brought a bag with her, but she tells him to keep his hands off, and immediately decides to leave. Pop thinks about how Knuckle Duster ruined everything, and we learn she was trying to return his hoodie. She puts it on, and recalls how he doesn't like to throw away his hoodies, wondering why he's so attached to them. A man named Akira is released from the police station, and we learn that he was interrogated because he used Trigger. He's asked how he contacts his dealer, but he reveals that he doesn't even know the person who gave it to him. That evening, Akira heads to an alley, where he sees Keen, who gives him a sample from the new batch of Trigger. He transforms into a villain again, and everyone panics as they see him. Koichi rushes to the scene, but he recognizes Akira as the villain they took down before, wondering why the police let him go. So Pop explains that he isn't registered as a villain yet, because he only committed one quirk-related offense. Koichi rushes forward, and Akira recognizes him, so he lunges at him. Koichi runs away, but Pop reminds him that Knuckle Duster isn't with them, because he had something important to do. Koichi thinks he can't defeat Akira alone, and he tells her to warn everyone while he distracts him, so she announces that an instant villain has appeared, telling them to call the cops. Akira continues to attack Koichi, who realizes that he's stronger than before, and Keen watches them through her bee. She writes down her observations, but notes that she wants to see Akira in person. Her friends ask her what she's working on, so she reveals that she's writing a report for her job. Koichi struggles to dodge Akira's attacks, and he loses his balance, so he thinks he's about to die. But a vigilante suddenly joins the fight, and he pushes Akira back. He attacks Akira with his sword, but realizes he can't cut through his skin, and they hear the cops approaching, so Akira runs away. Koichi thanks the vigilante for saving him, and asks him who he is, so he reveals that he's called Stendhal, telling him they'll meet again. The next day, Koichi talks about how Stendhal fought Akira, and Pop suddenly receives a message from the middle schoolers, telling her they have a notorious schoolmate who wants to meet her. Koichi is excited to meet him because he thinks the boy is also a vigilante. Knuckle Duster mentions that he might be dangerous, but Pop tells him to stay out of it. Pop and Koichi head to a restaurant, but they see the leader of the thugs, realizing he's the one who wanted to meet them. They freak out, and he asks them who they think he is, so Pop tells him he's a terrible person. He realizes they won't listen to him, so he walks away, but Koichi wonders what he wanted to talk about. Meanwhile, we see Akira running in an alley when he gets attacked by throwing knives. One of them hits his eye, and he screams in pain, so Stendhal realizes that his quirk doesn't affect his eyes. He knows that Akira is vulnerable when he loses his focus, so he continues to attack him, telling him he's lacking in conviction. Stendhal notes that wielding power without conviction is a crime, calling Akira a criminal, and he slices off his head. Keen watches Stendhal, thinking he's an interesting person, and he looks at his next target, but we see that it's the leader of the thugs. In a flashback to a few months earlier, we see a gangster named Tetsu as he tells his friends that the authorities are asking for their names because they're about to be included on the villain list. He thinks it's unfair that they'll be treated as villains just because they stick to the Yakuza code, but their leader Rogia mentions that they shouldn't change the way they live their lives. We learn that they're members of the Abigawa gang, which is labeled as a villain group, and their lieutenants have incredible quirks. But Stendhal breaks into their headquarters, so they all attack him at the same time, but he jumps away and uses his blood-curdling quirk to stop them from moving. We learn that it allows him to immobilize people by licking their blood, and he cuts them down in an instant. But more of the gang members arrive, asking him who he is, and he ends up wiping out the entire gang. After that, Stendhal removes his mask and explains that he's back to being an ordinary guy, telling Keen that Stendhal is the persona he created to slaughter criminals. We learn that she gave him the blood samples of the gang members, which she stole while they were having their regular checkups. But she asks him if she can name his next target, and he tells her not to push her luck because he'll kill her after she stops being useful to him. We return to the present as the thugs visit their friend Rapt, who's stuck in the hospital since he was slammed into a building when they encountered the giant. His friend Moiru gives him a manga to read, but Rapt mentions that he wants to smoke, and he asks Moiru to give him a light. So he uses his quirk to start a fire, but it triggers the alarm, and the nurse tells them they aren't allowed to smoke there. So they head outside, and Rapt reveals that he's about to get discharged, because his lizard quirk allows him to recover quickly. Moiru notes that he survived thanks to Trigger, but he explains that it's the reason why he almost died, so he doesn't think he should be thanking it. They both enjoyed the powers it gave them, and their leader Soga asks him if he would use it again. But he explains that he ended up in the hospital because of it, so he has learned his lesson. That evening, Soga meets Keen, who tells him his group is in trouble because they're being targeted by Stendhal, who wiped out a Yakuza gang. She tells Soga to work with his friends to defeat him, but he doesn't want to get them involved, so he decides to fight Stendhal alone. But as he starts walking away, Stendhal suddenly appears and prepares to fight him, while Keen notes that his friends will die if he loses. She shows him the triggers she brought, but he destroys them, telling her he doesn't need them to win. But she mentions that he's boring, and she uses her quirk to inject Trigger into his body, causing him to transform. Koichi hears him screaming, so he rushes over, but he's surprised to see Stendhal, realizing he's about to fight Soga. He tells Koichi to stand aside, and Soga launches his spikes at him, but he manages to block all of them. He slashes Soga's body, and he starts bleeding, as Koichi realizes that Stendhal is trying to kill him. So he pushes Stendhal away, and tries to escape with Soga, but Stendhal stabs his leg, and he falls to the ground. Stendhal tells him not to interfere, because Soga deserves to die, but he uses his quirk to slide away. He's about to reach the main street, but Stendhal licks his blood, causing him to crash, and he realizes he can't move. Stendhal prepares to finish them off, but Knuckle Duster suddenly gets in his way, and Stendhal recognizes him as a fellow vigilante, so he doesn't want to fight him. He thinks they're both fighting to make the world a better place, but Knuckle Duster explains that they're different, because he's a hero for justice, while Stendhal has lost the plot. He knows that Stendhal wants to strike at the perfect range, but he's being careful, since he'll be open if he misses. So Knuckle Duster puts a wire on the floor, telling Stendhal he'll be punched if he crosses it. He knows that Knuckle Duster is like an iron wall, so it's hard to hit him if he's focused on countering. But he rushes in anyway, thinking Knuckle Duster won't be able to hit him because of his speed. But Knuckle Duster suddenly crosses the line and punches him away, destroying his mask. He realizes that Stendhal wears a mask to assume his persona, and he thinks people like him are dangerous because they forget who they are while wearing their mask. He notes that their masks make them feel invincible, but they're still human, so they suffer whenever they get hit, and he thinks they wear masks since they lack resolve. But Stendhal mentions that he finally understands, and he suddenly attacks Knuckleduster with his knives and manages to cut his hand. He jumps away and notes that those without resolve are worse than villains because they're just fake heroes. He licks Knuckleduster's blood, so he gets paralyzed, but Stendhal mentions that he has finally been enlightened, and he thanks Knuckleduster for showing him the way. He decides to spare him, and after he leaves, Knuckleduster helps treat Koichi. Pop arrives, and Knuckleduster tells her to look after Soga, so she starts patching him up. Koichi is glad that they both survived, but Soga wonders why he's still smiling, because he almost got killed, so Pop mentions that he's an idiot. We see Stendhal thinking about how he lacks resolve, and Keen finds him interesting, but he suddenly stabs her eye. He cuts off his nose, and thinks he no longer needs his mask, because his new look suits him better. But as he walks away, Keen gets back up, and she takes out his knife, thinking he's a narcissist, because he keeps talking to himself. But she notes that she doesn't mind, because she finds him interesting. We see Koichi reading a book during his lunch break, when his senior Makoto suddenly sits beside him, and she realizes that he's studying for his hero's sociology exam. She knows that the book is difficult to understand, so she decides to help him, but she notes that everyone calls him the Creeper of East Narahata. He can't believe everyone still finds him creepy, but she mentions that she's looking for someone who lives in that area, telling him to show her around in exchange for her help. We see Pop in Koichi's home, but she sees him with Makoto, so she panics and hides behind the divider. He tells Makoto to wait outside while he fixes his stuff, and he hides his hoodie because he doesn't want her to find out that he's the crawler. He welcomes her into his house, and she starts teaching him about the subject, which covers the friction between vigilantism and the hero licensing system. She explains that vigilantism is a civilian peacekeeping system, which occurs during times of social disorder, but most of its members don't get absorbed into official systems. She reveals that there was chaos when people first acquired the power of quirks, so ordinary citizens became vigilantes, and used their powers to keep the peace. Laws were later passed to govern the use of quirks, and the vigilantes became heroes, because they gained a legal basis for their actions. But she reveals that it's only the official story, and notes that the first hero licensing system was created in the state of Rhode Island, where 189 vigilantes applied to become heroes. But only 7 of them were accepted, and most of them were classified as villains for illegal quirk use. She notes that the true purpose of the hero licensing system is not to promote heroes, but to separate them from villains, whose activities are limited by the authorities. But it remains a controversial topic to this day, because there are people who think it violates human rights. She gives Koichi tips on how to answer the exam, and tells him to review the pages she marked, so he thanks her for her help. She asks him if he knows the decisive factor which separated heroes from villains when the law took effect, and he mentions that he doesn't know, but she refuses to give him the answer. She notes that it has nothing to do with the exam, but it's the theme of her independent study, which he must help her complete if he wants to know the answer. He agrees to help her out, but he wonders what she has in mind, so she reveals that she's interested in Knuckleduster's group. Koichi loses his composure, so she asks him what's wrong, but he just tells her it's dangerous to get involved with vigilantes because they're always fighting villains. But she tells him he'll serve as her bodyguard, telling him to meet her on the weekend. After she leaves, Koichi notes that he's in a tight spot, so he needs to find a way to fool her, but he's excited for their meeting. But Pop asks him why he's happy, and he realizes that she was there the whole time. We see Makoto working in her house, and we learn that she lives with her brother Tsukachi, who realizes that she's writing a paper for her study. She tells him she's gathering data, and asks him if he has any interesting info about heroes or villains, but he explains that he isn't allowed to share anything with her. He tells her not to approach villains out of curiosity, because their existence is linked with crime, so she might get into trouble, but she thinks she just needs to be careful. We return to Koichi as he studies for his exam, but Pop is angry because Makoto barged in like she owned the place. A few days later, Koichi comes up with a strategy to fight villains with his quirk, and Knuckleduster thinks it's impressive because his opponent will struggle to keep up with his moves. But Pop thinks it's pathetic, and Koichi notes that she's been in a bad mood since Makoto visited the house. He explains the situation to Knuckleduster, who tells him he can't allow Makoto to find out about their secret identities because they might get into trouble. He considers beating her up to silence her, but Koichi promises to keep their secret, and Knuckleduster decides to let him handle it, but advises him not to mix business and pleasure. Koichi meets Makoto at the train station, and he's stunned by how she looks, but we see Pop spying on them, thinking she's nothing special. She notes that she knows the places where Knuckle Duster's group usually shows up, and thinks they should start by gathering information there. She reveals that she wants to know how the public sees them, and she tells Koichi that the factor that separated heroes from villains when the law took effect was the level of their popularity. She notes that the modern hero ranking system is largely a popularity contest, and she wants to know if the locals favor Knuckle Duster's group, telling Koichi to film her while she interviews everyone. She asks Namamaru and Ichinoku for their opinion, so they mention that they're Pop's fans, but they think Knuckle Duster is dangerous. She proceeds to interview the other locals, and none of them get the crawler's name right, but they all think he looks creepy. They like Pop since she looks cute, but nobody trusts Knuckle Duster because they're all scared of him. Makoto writes the answers of the locals in her laptop, but a villain named Yatsura suddenly steals it from her, and he dribbles his ball as he dashes past the crowd. Namamaru and Ichinoku chase after him, while Koichi tells Makoto to stay there, and he prepares to go after them. But Pop tells him not to interfere, because Makoto will stop looking into them if she doesn't recover her laptop, but he mentions that he wants to show off as the crawler. He catches up to Yatsura and tries to sweep him, but he dodges the attack, and kicks his ball into Koichi to blow him away. But Ichinoku fires his optic blast, and it knocks Yatsura down, while Koichi manages to get Makoto's laptop. And when she catches up to him, he gives it back to her, telling her the crawler was the one who retrieved it. Later that day, Makoto thanks Koichi for helping her with her study, but she shakes his hand and activates her quirk, asking him if he's the crawler. We learn that her quirk is called Polygraph, and it allows her to detect if a person is lying. But she didn't get his name right, so he tells her he isn't the crawler, and she knows that he's telling the truth. That evening, Makoto struggles to complete her study because she wasn't able to gather any interesting information. Pop realizes that the locals don't like the crawler, but Koichi notes that most of her fans are perverts, and he's upset because nobody is getting his name right. We see Koichi chasing a robber, but Pop tells him to leave it to the police because it's dangerous to chase down a motorcycle. The robber uses his long leg quirk to kick him away, and he's about to get hit by Truck-kun, but a hero suddenly saves him and takes down the robber. Koichi thanks him for saving his life, asking him who he is, but he can't believe Koichi doesn't recognize him, revealing that he's America's top-ranked hero, Captain Celebrity. He gives Koichi his autograph, but he gets upset since he wrote on his favorite All Might hoodie, but he notes that his signature is worth more than his jacket. He mentions that All Might has no style, telling Koichi to be careful when playing hero, and he flies away. We see an ad about Captain Celebrity, and we learn that his flight quirk allows him to travel across the world while saving countless people. He's been ranked among America's top heroes for 10 years, and he announces his plan to work in Tokyo, so everyone greets him as he arrives, wondering how much impact he'll make in the country. Pop and Knuckle Duster watch his ad, and they see him lifting a massive ship off the ocean, so Pop is impressed by his powers, but Knuckle Duster knows that he has issues. He reveals that Captain Celebrity is also known as the Catastrophe because he's involved in several scandals, and Knuckle Duster thinks he came to Japan only because he can no longer work in America. We see a giant villain going on a rampage, so everyone starts to panic, while Keen notes that the gigantification quirk makes for a nice show. But she knows that the heroes are on their way, so she walks away, thinking she can just get a sample after it's defeated. The villain starts destroying the buildings as Koichi helps everyone evacuate, but he sees a girl crying because they left her dog behind. Captain Celebrity arrives, and Koichi tells him they need to save the girl's dog, but he explains that he can't move yet because he's still waiting for the press to finish setting up. Koichi decides to go alone, but Captain Celebrity's team tells him it's time to make his move, so he saves the civilians and starts fighting the villain. We see Koichi looking for the dog when the villain crashes into a nearby building and he almost gets hit by the rubble. He manages to find the dog and prepares to take him to safety, but Captain Celebrity finishes off the villain and it starts to fall on Koichi. But Captain Celebrity saves him and gives him his autograph once again before posing for the pictures. After that, Pop mentions that there were no casualties thanks to Captain Celebrity, and Koichi reunites the girl with her dog. But Captain Celebrity tells him to stop getting involved with his lame outfit because he's ruining the action scenes whenever he shows up on camera. That evening, we see people gathered outside a building which is about to collapse because the villain's attack left it in terrible shape. Koichi rushes to save the people inside, and he sees a lady and a sumo wrestler who have both injured their legs. He knows he can only carry one of them, but Captain Celebrity suddenly arrives and tells him they need to work together. but he takes the girl to safety while Koichi struggles to carry the sumo wrestler, asking Captain Celebrity why they didn't do it the other way around. So he explains that carrying the sumo would make him look bad, and Koichi is almost hit by falling debris, but Captain Celebrity catches it, and he tells the press to take their pictures. He mentions that they must now demolish the building, and his cheering squad starts performing for him as he destroys it with style. Koichi thinks it looks inappropriate, but he admits that he's jealous, and he can't believe Makoto is in the cheering squad. She sees him with Pop, and she wants to interview them, but they run away, and Captain Celebrity takes an interest in her. He mentions that he wants to get to know her better, so she agrees to have lunch with him, and he tells her he knows a place with an excellent view. Koichi thinks he's a creep, and Knuckle Duster reveals that he's a notorious womanizer who was involved in countless lawsuits because of his behavior. His wife sued him for damages, and he ended up losing everything, but he still hasn't learned his lesson. A few days later, we see Makoto waiting for Captain Celebrity, while Koichi watches her in secret, but Captain Celebrity sees him, telling him she's from his agency. She's surprised to see Koichi, and he explains that he was just passing by, but Captain Celebrity tells him they're about to go on a date, and he flies away with her. They reach the restaurant, where Makoto tells Captain Celebrity that a villain has just robbed the bank, but he doesn't care, telling her he wants to enjoy his time with her. She gets a call, and he tells her to ignore it, saying he'll take her somewhere special, but she answers it anyway, and he realizes that she's talking to his wife Pamela. She reveals that she met Pamela online, and she can't believe he's messing around abroad, telling him he's about to get sued again, but he suddenly leaves to deal with the robbery. We see the police telling everyone to stay back, and Koichi realizes that he can't do anything because he left his hoodie at home. But Captain Celebrity suddenly appears, and he takes down the robber, so the girls rush to him. But he tells them to stay back because he isn't allowed to be with them, and he flies away with Koichi. They take pictures together, and Captain Celebrity sends them to his wife, telling her there's been a misunderstanding. Koichi realizes that he isn't used to taking pictures with men, and Makoto comes up with an idea, telling Captain Celebrity it's time for a rebranding. We see his new ad in the news, as the reporter notes that he used to be a playboy, but he's using it to change his corporate image. His team mentions that he has turned into a real man, because he has decided to stop messing around, but Koichi and his friends wonder what happened to him. After that, Koichi's father calls him and tells him his mother is on her way to visit him, so he freaks out because he knows she'll get mad if his place is a mess. He notes that she never wanted him to stay there, so she'll make him drop out of school if she sees that he isn't doing well, and he recalls that he told her he has a girlfriend. He thinks he'll get into trouble if she finds out that he lied to her, and he wonders what he should do if she wants to meet his girlfriend, but Pop blushes hearing this, and she rushes off. His mother suddenly arrives, and she sees that everything's well organized, so she realizes that he's doing well, but she mentions that she wants to meet his girlfriend. Makoto comes to visit, and introduces herself as his girlfriend, but his mother suddenly slaps him with her quirk, because she knows that he's lying. But Makoto notes that she's been keeping an eye on his studies, and she hasn't ruled out the possibility of dating him. Koichi's mother tells Makoto not to get her hopes up, but she takes a liking to her because of her charm. Pop also joins them, but she's surprised to see Makoto, so she tries to leave, but Koichi tells her to stay, because he wants his mother to think he's popular. He's about to introduce her as Pop, but she mentions that her name is Kazuho, and tells him to just roll with it. Knuckle Duster also joins them, but they realize he looks decent, and Koichi introduces his mother to him. He shows her his business card, introducing himself as Kuroiwa, and Makoto also wants to see it. She realizes that he works for a non-profit company and asks him what kind of work he does, so he reveals that he gathers volunteers like Koichi and Pop to help the public. They can't believe he's such a good liar, and Koichi's mother believes him because her son always enjoyed cleaning up the neighborhood. Knuckle Duster notes that they use Koichi's house for their meetings, and he even teaches him self-defense on the roof, so Makoto thinks he must be strong and starts feeling his muscles. She wonders if he's a hero, but he doesn't respond, and Koichi's mother tells her it's best for people to have ordinary lives, because heroes live for the sake of others. She reveals that Koichi wanted to become a hero when he was little, but he failed his high school entrance exam because he fell into a river. So she thinks he's unreliable, but Pop tells her it isn't true, and Koichi's mother asks her to explain, but she suddenly runs off. Koichi's mother tells him to go after her, and Makoto suggests complimenting her if he catches up to her. Pop slips on the stairs, but Koichi saves her, telling her she looks different today. She blushes hearing this, but he notes that she looks like she put her outfit on in a hurry, so she becomes upset, but we learn that he was just trying to compliment her. The next day, Koichi shows his mother around the city, and they reach the market, where he sees a special All Might hoodie. His mother tells him not to waste his money on it, so he explains that he was just looking at it, but after she leaves, he buys it in secret. They return to their bus, but a cat suddenly jumps on top of it, and Keen injects Trigger into it. She notes that it's time for a surprise tour, and the cat merges with the bus, as the driver realizes that he has lost control. Knuckle Duster sees the cat, but he knows that it can't give him any information about Trigger, so he considers leading it to the pros, but he realizes that Koichi is one of the passengers. He calls Pop, and tells her Koichi is in trouble, so she rushes to the scene, revealing that she has a duster and some tape with her. The cat starts to move with incredible speed, so the passengers start to panic, but Ingenium suddenly catches up to them, and he destroys the door to enter the bus. The driver explains that he can't do anything to stop the bus, and Ingenium is worried, because they're about to reach the shopping district. But Knuckle Duster uses his cat toy to attract its attention, and redirects it to the expressway. Ingenium reports the situation to his team, but he learns that the road was destroyed by the giant villain, and they'll reach the broken section in 5 minutes. His team's trailer arrives, and the hero Enigma uses her quirk to transfer the passengers to the trailer. But Keen notes that it's getting boring, so she injects even more Trigger into the cat, causing it to go berserk. It attacks the trailer, and 2 of the passengers fall out, so Ingenium jumps off to save them. He chases after the cat, because Makoto is still inside it, but he runs out of fuel, and starts to slow down, so his team looks for someone who can give him his juice. Koichi volunteers to do it, and his mother tries to stop him, but he explains that they're running out of time. He takes the juice, and rushes to Ingenium's side, telling him to use it to replenish his fuel. He tells Koichi to support him, as he moves ahead, but the cat attacks him with its tail. He tells Koichi to distract it, so he moves in front of the cat, but it suddenly lunges at him, because it thinks his hoodie is a cat toy. Ingenium uses his Recipro Burst to save him, but the cat immediately recovers, and it speeds up, as he realizes that they're about to reach the broken section. He thinks about using his trump card, but Koichi suddenly rushes forward, and he manages to board the bus, but Makoto realizes that he's the crawler. They reach the broken section, and the bus is about to crash, but Ingenium uses his rocket charge, telling Koichi to jump so he can save him. So he uses his quirk to speed up, and jumps as high as he can, but he isn't able to reach Ingenium. But he refuses to give up, and he suddenly is able to fly. We learn that he could fly when he was a baby, but his mother was worried he might fly away, so she would slap him to make him stop. He gives Makoto to Ingenium, but he suddenly loses control, and crashes to the ground. Ingenium reaches his limit, and Makoto is worried about Koichi, but he tells her he's okay. That evening, Koichi's mother tells him she needs to go home, telling his friends to look after him while she's gone, and she asks Makoto if he has a chance, so she notes that she'll keep her mind open. The next day, Koichi practices how to fly, but he barely manages to lift himself off the ground, so Pop tells him he needs more training. He mentions that he was able to fly when he saved Makoto, but Pop doesn't believe him, telling him he must have been hallucinating. He tells her it really happened, but he doesn't remember how he did it, thinking it must have been a miracle thanks to his new jacket. We see Knuckle Duster in the hospital, where he visits his wife, and tells her about everything that's happening in his life. We learn that she's in critical condition, because Keen's bees attacked her, and the doctor tells him things aren't looking good for her. At the school, we see Soga asking girls if they know Keen, but they're all afraid of him, and her friends wonder why he's looking for her. But the teachers tell him they've been receiving complaints about him, so they ask him to leave. He starts walking around the town, but Keen's friend calls him and asks him why he's looking for her. She thinks he looks sus, but he explains that he's just a messenger, so she realizes he's just an errand boy, telling him she doesn't want to waste her time on him. Bees suddenly come out of her body, so he tries to use insecticide on them, but it doesn't work. Moira suddenly burns them away, and Rapt gives him a helmet as the bees continue to chase after him. So he gets on Rapt's bike, and they drive away to escape from the bees. His friends wonder if he got into trouble again, and he explains that it's none of their business, but they think things are getting interesting, so they decide to help him. We return to the hospital, where Knuckle Duster tells his wife about what the doctor told him, but he remains positive and tells her not to give up. She wants their daughter Tama to go home before it gets late, so he tells her not to worry, because he'll take care of everything. He sees Soga in the reception area, and asks him what he's doing there, so he explains that he's looking for him. Knuckle Duster reveals that Kuroiwa isn't his real name, and he only put it on his business card to help people get in touch with him. So Soga starts asking him personal questions, but Knuckle Duster tells him not to meddle in other people's business. He reveals that he looked into Keen, and he was able to track down her school, but he ended up getting attacked. Knuckle Duster is glad that he was able to obtain useful intel, but he realizes that Soga is worried about Koichi and Pop. So he mentions that they don't need to get involved, and explains that new leads will continue to appear, because Soga is already attracting attention. So he realizes that he's a decoy, and Knuckle Duster tells him he's perfect for the role, because he can't go around dressed up as a hero. After that, Soga's friends tell him to stop getting involved, because Knuckle Duster is dangerous, but Koichi suddenly greets him. Moira wonders why he's so friendly, and reminds him that Soga once beat him up, but he explains that a lot has happened since then. Keen heads back home, and she returns her father's credit card, telling him it's been maxed out. She starts watching the news with her parents, but we see that they're already dead, and she notes that she's getting tired of living there, so she decides to look for another place to stay. Pop receives an offer to attend an event, but she wonders if she should go there, because she knows that she's nothing compared to the other performers. She's afraid that she might disappoint her fans, but she thinks she won't get another opportunity like this again, so she asks Koichi for advice. But he doesn't know what to tell her, so he asks for Knuckle Duster's opinion, and he tells her to go for it, telling Koichi to help her out. He wishes them luck before he leaves, and Koichi finds him strange, because he isn't as weird as usual. Koichi promises to help her, but he calls Makoto, who reveals that she knows about her secret identity. So Pop is angry, wondering why he told Makoto about it, but he explains that she just has good intuition, and she found out about them after the bus incident. Makoto tells her not to be upset, because she won't tell anyone about their secret identities, and she'll do her best to help them as part of her work. Pop agrees to work with her, and she reviews their current situation, so she realizes that Pop was invited to a free live event, which will be held on the roof of a department store. She notes that the rooftop food court will open on the same day, so she thinks it's just a casual setting, where the customers can watch the show while they enjoy their meals. So Koichi tells Pop there's nothing to worry about, but she's disappointed that the performance is like a karaoke, so Makoto tells her they should take it to the next level. Meanwhile, the civilians panic as they see a villain, but Captain Celebrity arrives, and he beats them up, as his squad cheers for him. We learn that he gained popularity because of his Japanese-style cheering squad, and he receives a call from Makoto, who reveals that the city is still recovering from the giant villain's attack. He explains that he's doing his best to help everyone, but she tells him she has a plan, which will increase his popularity among the locals. She calls the event organizers, and tells them Captain Celebrity will make an appearance for free, as long as they give him credit. She explains that her team's goal is to push the neighborhood restoration image, so they will do anything to help make the event successful. After that, she notes that she used Captain Celebrity's name to push the organizers to upgrade the event, so it's now an indie live concert. Pop thanks her for her help, and she mentions that a higher-up in the department store wants them to create an ensemble, where the young locals will sing the store's theme song. She shows them a video of the song, and Pop thinks it's amazing, but she wonders if she can do it justice, because she has never collaborated with people before. After that, the middle schoolers learn about her collab with Captain Celebrity, and they promise to bring their friends to support her. But she isn't sure if she'll perform well, because it will be her first time on a real stage, and Koichi tells them she's under a lot of pressure. Later that night, Keen learns about the event, but she suddenly hears a strange sound, which makes her angry. She isn't sure what it was, but it makes her want to ruin the event, and her friend suddenly calls out to her, telling her their other friend hasn't been coming to school. But she mentions that she doesn't know anything, and we see Knuckle Duster watching her, recognizing her as the villain who attacked his family. Koichi joins Pop as her manager, and they head to the conference room, where Makoto introduces them to an underground idol duo called Feathers. She notes that the other members of the ensemble will arrive soon, but Pop hears Feathers talking about her, because her outfit looks cheap. A high school dance squad appears, and their president mentions that they'll participate in the event, but Makoto realizes that they don't have a uniform, so she offers to come up with something for them. But the president mentions that it isn't necessary, because they believe that costumes won't improve their performance. A rock band called Mad Hatter arrives, and their leader mentions that he doesn't want to be part of the ensemble, but he sees the president, and they both instantly fall in love. So he decides to join the ensemble, while she mentions that she wants to look good for him, and Makoto promises to prepare a costume for her. They begin the meeting, and Makoto mentions that the band and dancers are all set, but they need to discuss how Pop will work with Feathers. She suggests putting Pop in the center, but Feathers is against the idea, because they will look like backup singers, and they know that she isn't good at singing. Makoto agrees with them, but notes that she has better stage presence, since they aren't used to moving while they're singing. So Makoto tells her to practice singing in the coming week, while Feathers trains with the dance squad. She explains that a week before the event, they will check everyone's condition and decide their positions on stage. But the other members of her team want to talk to her, so she ends the meeting, telling everyone they'll be the stars of the event. After that, Pop receives the audio file from Makoto, and she notes that it's time to practice, so Koichi tells her she can use his house all she wants. She sings as she listens to the recording, while Feathers struggles to keep up with the dance squad, and the president pushes them to keep going, but one of them ends up getting injured. We see a giant worm attacking the city, but Captain Celebrity arrives and defeats it with a single hit, telling the civilians that the collab event will happen in 10 days. A week before the event, everyone realizes that Miyu sprained her ankle, so she won't be able to dance on stage. The president apologizes for pushing her past her limit, but Makoto takes responsibility because she's the one in charge of the project. She considers removing Miyu from the ensemble, but she's sad because she practiced for the performance. So Pop suggests putting her in the center instead, where she doesn't have to move around, because her twin Yoon can keep moving behind her while Pop jumps around. Makoto thinks her plan might work, and the twins decide to go with it, while Pop mentions that they should all do their best. That evening, Keen sees an ad about the event, and she wants to make a surprise appearance, but we see that Taro has transformed, and she plans to use him to wreak havoc. We see a singer named Haruza performing on stage, and everyone cheers for him, while the hero present Mike mentions that the afternoon portion of the event has come to an end. He notes that the group Feather Hats will be the first to perform this evening, and we see that Pop is nervous, but the president tells everyone to calm down. The hero Midnight mentions that they look perfect, and Makoto apologizes for not providing a private waiting room for the heroes, but Midnight tells her it's okay. Present Mike appears, and she asks him about Eraserhead, because the heroes who fought the instant villains were all invited to the event, but the famous ones decided not to attend. We see Eraserhead walking in the streets, and he hopes a villain will appear, so that he'll have an excuse to skip the event. He suddenly hears a commotion, so he jumps into action, and we see Taro going on a rampage. Eraserhead restrains him, and he knows that Taro's quirk is out of control, so he uses his eyes to erase it. But it doesn't work, and Taro manages to break free, so he tries to subdue him, but he realizes his attacks just slip off him. So he traps him in a net, but Taro cries as he remembers Pop, and he unleashes a blast of electricity, which causes a blackout. Keen thinks she can get a good sample from him, but her boss suddenly calls her and scolds her for being reckless, telling her she's putting their experiments at risk. She mentions that she hates getting lectured, but Knuckle Duster suddenly appears, and he mentions that he can understand her, because he also doesn't like taking orders. He tells her it's time to go home, because her mother is waiting for her, but she asks him what he's talking about. So he reveals that he's talking to Tama, who's the owner of her body, but she laughs at him, realizing he's using a stun gun because he doesn't want to hurt his daughter. He starts attacking her, telling her he isn't using an ordinary stun gun, because the shock will kill her if it touches her chest. She thinks he's bluffing, and she starts running as she releases her bees, so he rushes towards her, but a bee explodes, and she reveals that some of them have explosives. She orders her bomb bees to attack him, and he gets covered in explosions, so she thinks the fight is over. But she realizes that he's still alive, and he notes that she was bluffing, because only the first one had explosives, while the rest were filled with fireworks. He realizes that the explosives take a toll on her, so there's a limit to the number of bomb bees she can use, and he thinks she's bluffing since she knows she can't defeat him. But she jumps away, so he chases after her, telling her she can't get away from him. Eraserhead tells Midnight he can't make it to the event because he ran into a villain, but he mentions that he already took care of him, so he's just waiting for the wagon to take him away. Makoto realizes that the villain's quirk caused the blackout, and it will take time to restore power, because the transformers in the area were damaged. She comes up with a plan, telling everyone that Captain Celebrity will return with generators, but they will need to keep the audience entertained. The heroes explain that they can't help, because they need to remain on standby until the situation is resolved, but Koichi suddenly appears, and gives Pop her microphone. She decides to entertain the audience until Captain Celebrity returns, so Makoto gives her an earpiece, telling her she'll use it to communicate with her while she's on stage. We return to Knuckle Duster, as he receives a call from a nurse, who tells him there's been a sudden change in his wife's condition. So he tells her he'll head to the hospital with his family, and he continues to pursue Keen. Pop greets everyone, and tells them the staff is working to get things running again, so she asks them to wait until the lights come back on. She introduces herself as a street performer, but she admits that she's nervous because it's her first time on stage. She tells her fans to bring out their light sticks and line up along the edges of the audience so that they will know where to go in case they need a bathroom break. She notes that there's still time before the main event, telling everyone to listen to her until the power comes back on, and she begins her performance. Feathers notes that she isn't a good singer, but they admit that she's cute, and Eraserhead hears the audience cheering for her, so he realizes that the event wasn't cancelled because of the blackout. Taro is glad to hear her voice, so Eraserhead realizes that he's her fan, but he sees a bee extracting fluid from Taro, so he tries to get rid of it, but it flies away. Keen reaches a dead end, and Knuckle Duster has her cornered, but she uses her bees to inject Trigger into her body. He knows that she's planning to force her way past him, but thinks it will weaken her control over Tama's body because her mind is formed from a composite of the host's brain. In a flashback, we see Tama as she prepares to leave for a concert, but Knuckle Duster tells her to stop wasting time with music. So she becomes upset, telling him he knows nothing about her, and her mother tells her to apologize, but she runs away and ends up being controlled by Keen. Back in the present, Keen tells Knuckle Duster to leave her alone, and she rushes forward, as a bee gives her the electricity quirk. She uses it to attack Knuckle Duster's chest, and his heart stops beating, as he notes that he wasn't expecting her to use such an attack, but she realizes that she also fried her hand. We go back to when Knuckle Duster talked to the person who made his stun gun, and he gives him a note, telling him he needs a pheromone that attracts insects for pest control. The man doesn't understand why he wants it, but Knuckle Duster asks him to add a defibrillator as well, because he needs it to save someone's life. Makoto's team tells her they're ready for the main event, so Featherhats gets on stage, and the lights come back on as they begin their performance. Pop sings with Feathers, and everyone enjoys their performance, while the owner of the store gives a speech about how he wants the youth to support them. Everyone cheers for them as they end their performance, and we see Keen as she realizes that the show is back on, so she thinks about ruining it. But Knuckle Duster stops her, and she wonders how he's still alive, but he tells her she doesn't need to be jealous, because he'll support her if she wants to be a musician. He tells her not to listen to the bees in her head, and promises to be the best father in the world, but she mentions that she finds him annoying. She notes that she was enjoying Tama's body, so she was taking care of it, but she thinks she needs to look for a new host, and decides to put everything on the line to defeat him. She charges in and starts beating him up as he realizes that she's going all out because she's using her bomb bees and electricity at the same time. He knows that Tama will die if he doesn't end the fight soon, and recalls that he lost her because he couldn't handle the situation before she left, but he notes that things are different now. He focuses on her movements and lands a devastating counterattack, which causes her heart to stop beating. He notes that blood has stopped flowing to her brain, so she thinks about using an electric shock to restart her heart. But he stops her, and her bees start flying away, so he realizes that she has lost control over them, and he removes her from Tama's body. He throws her away, and uses his pheromone bomb to attract the bees, killing all of them in a massive explosion. He uses his defibrillator to save Tama, and starts giving her chest compressions, because he wants to take her back home. The cops prepare to take Taro away, but they realize that he doesn't want to leave yet, and Eraserhead asks them to wait, promising to look after him until he calms down. Eraserhead tells him they've reached the good part, and Taro is glad that he can listen to Pop, while the audience realizes that she's an excellent performer. Tsukachi wonders if Taro is an instant villain, but Eraserhead mentions that he's different, thinking he didn't go on a rampage because of Trigger. But Eraserhead tells Tsukachi about the bee he saw, and Tsukachi notes that bees were involved in a mass outbreak of instant villains. We see a man with a vial, and he notes that he's keeping records, but he sees a bee flying around, so he uses his super speed to capture it, thinking he can use it to achieve his goal. After that, Pop watches a video of the event, and she's satisfied with her performance, revealing that she received mail from her fans. She watches it again and starts singing along, and she becomes exhausted, but Koichi finds her entertaining. A mantis villain attacks the city, so everyone panics, and Koichi suddenly appears, but he just runs away as the villain starts chasing him. Captain Celebrity arrives, and he takes down the villain, so Koichi thanks him, but Captain Celebrity tells him he wants to talk to him in private. So they head to Koichi's house, where Captain Celebrity reveals that he doesn't agree with Koichi's methods, because he always gets into trouble. He explains that he's just trying to help the people, but Captain Celebrity tells him to just act like an ordinary citizen, because he's just creating more work for him. Pop asks Captain Celebrity to appear in the next event, but he explains that he isn't interested, because he doesn't get paid to do it, so Koichi tells her to ask Makoto instead. Captain Celebrity reveals that his schedule is always packed because of her, so he wants to rest there for a change, but Koichi suddenly receives a call from her. She wonders if Captain Celebrity is there, and Koichi tells her he isn't, but she knows that he's lying, and she suddenly appears. She reminds Captain Celebrity about his appointments, and they fly away, as Koichi realizes that they're always busy. Pop thinks they should stay away from the villains they can't defeat, because they're causing trouble for the heroes, and Koichi thinks about carrying a weapon for self-defense. But Pop thinks it won't end well for him, telling him he's better off sticking to his usual role. At the police station, Tsukachi tells everyone about the new variant of instant villains, revealing that a doctor examined Taro and discovered that his transformation is semi-permanent. Tsukachi reveals that they arrested villains and found Trigger in their blood samples, but the dose was much higher than usual. Eraserhead thinks their bodies look different because of a Trigger overdose, but Tsukachi notes that someone gave them the ability to withstand it, so they realize they're dealing with organized crime. Eraserhead notes that the instant villains are like expendable pawns, because they can't run and hide after their rampage is over, so he thinks someone's scheming behind the scenes. Pop welcomes everyone to the department store's event and introduces them to a group called the Little Sisters, who start performing on stage. Enginium and Captain Celebrity work on a commercial, and everyone thinks it looks great, but Captain Celebrity notes that it isn't good enough, because his hair covered his face in one frame. Everyone thinks he's ridiculous, but Enginium agrees to do a retake. We return to Pop, as she tells Miyu that Captain Celebrity won't attend the event, and Miyu realizes that she just made an empty promise to the Little Sisters, because she told them a hero would appear. Pop introduces everyone to the special guest, but Captain Celebrity isn't there, so she tells them it's the Crawler. Nobody recognizes him, and he has no idea what to do, so she tells him to just do something, and he decides to sing for them, but he picks the song the Little Sisters just performed. The twins don't like his performance, and Yoon apologizes to the Little Sisters, but they tell her it's okay, asking her when they'll meet the hero. We return to Captain Celebrity, as everyone prepares to shoot the scene again, but we see the strange man watching them, and he presses a button, which causes a truck to appear. It slams into the production truck, and it's about to crush Makoto, but Captain Celebrity saves her. The Bat villain appears, and Enginium recognizes him, so he tries to stop him, but the villain flies away. We learn that he wants to get revenge on Koichi, and Captain Celebrity chases after him, but he realizes that he can't catch up. The villain hears Koichi singing, so he dives in to catch him, and starts flying away with him, but Captain Celebrity manages to reach them, and he knocks the villain out with a single hit. Koichi starts to fall, but Captain Celebrity saves him, telling him he makes a good decoy. They end up going back to the event, and the Little Sisters are happy they were able to meet him. We see Koichi cleaning his house, when he sees Knuckle Duster's equipment, wondering why he left it there. Pop reveals that he left for work, and Koichi thinks he wants it cleaned, so he starts washing it. He recalls the last time they took down a villain, and he invited Knuckle Duster to hang out at his place, but he mentioned that there was something he needed to do. Makoto joins Koichi, and she notes that she wants to interview Knuckle Duster, but Koichi reveals that he isn't there. So she decides to talk to Pop instead, and Koichi is glad that they're getting along. We see Soga watching Tama in the hospital, and she wakes up, asking him where her father is. Knuckle Duster is glad that she's finally awake, and he thanks Soga for watching over her, telling him he'll be in touch. He gives her food, but she mentions that her head hurts, so he tells her to go to sleep. She asks him about her mother, and we learn that she died when he got back, but she was happy since she knew he was able to save Tama. He tells Tama she can't meet her mother for now, but he assures her that everything will be okay, because he will stay by her side. Pop hangs a corkboard in Koichi's home, and she mentions that she'll fill it with concert pictures and fan letters, but he just uses it to hang Knuckle Duster's bandana. Makoto visits them, and she talks to Pop again, while Koichi remembers the times he spent with his master. We learn that he always saw him as the head of the household, but after he left, Koichi didn't stop being the Crawler, because he believes that he's making the world a better place. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.